Good morning, Melonya. How are you?
Hello, Tahitia.
Hello, hello, hello. Uh-oh. I'm going to flip us back to that screen so they can see who we are, just in case they're joining for the first time.
Happy
Okay.
Friday.
Happy Friday, girl. I
Mm.
have a lot of energy this morning because I
Good,
already took a walk.
good, good. I'm glad.
So I got
Good. You have
energy.
energy for both of us. That's awesome.
That's not true. Uh, the energy is going to flow from both of us this morning. If you're tuning in to us for the first time, I'm Tahitia,
I'm Melonya.
and we are both coaches. And on Fridays, every Friday, we get together around 9 a.m. Eastern time to just shoot I won't say the word. We talk about everything and anything under the sun. Mainly, it has been the state of the US right now because we are both dedicated to, giving voice to the voiceless. And so, I think that's both a shared passion of ours. Um, and so, Melania, what are you bringing to the discussion this morning?
Support. I'm bringing.
And that is what we all need, right? Like sources of support.
You know what? You and I attended something last night, which has been on my mind. Are you an agitator or a creator?
Oh my
Um,
goodness,
and I
yeah.
and that's something that I have been mulling around in my mind since then. So maybe after you get finished talking about what you want to talk about, which you shared with me, which is a cardinal rule, we do not share our topics before we is filling the brain drain one unscripted conversation at a time. And
Yes.
this week you shared with me, I don't know if you're still going to stick with it, what you were going to talk about, because it's something that's stuck in your craw. So,
I don't know if that is what I'm actually talking about
oh,
anymore
what
because
are you
my
talking?
brain is like a sieve right now. It's just like stuff is coming, and I'm like, "Good," like, but I think it's also the energy of the nation, right? You're hit with so much. I'm like, yeah, I want to talk about that, and then Friday comes, and what I thought about on Tuesday or Wednesday shifts because like a whole bunch of stuff jumped to the forefront
A
first.
whole lifetime of stuff happened on
Yes.
Wednesday.
Yes. I was 51 on Monday, and now I'm 72. No.
It's true. I wish
It's
it
a
weren't, but it's true.
we all do, right? Today, what I'm bringing to the table is, I do wanna talk about science, which I don't think that was what I know, that wasn't what I was talking about the other like, that's why we don't share what we're gonna talk about. So I got to thinking about all of this stuff with RFK Jr., right? And autism and science research and all the defunding and the NIH. And so I'm really talking about the idea that, faster is better, that fallacy, and how when faster is better, the fallacy of that meets science, right? Science is slow. So we have a president in the US who is very like go 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 in mentality and in what wants to see results for, and I think that is part of the issue as science meets this new administration. Like, what will that look like? What will the like budget cuts and shortcuts here, how will that, because I do feel like we're on a path for if we initiate some things, it will be very hard for us to recover. So that's what I'm talking about. But by the time we get to it, it might have shifted. Now
And that happens sometimes.
it does.
That happens. That happens. Who's doing controls today? You or me?
Um, I'll do controls. I'll do
All
controls.
right, let's
I
go.
feel controlling.
Go
I'm
ahead.
wearing black.
Somebody needs
If
to.
if my mouse moves towards that, let's see what happens. There we go. Here we go. Boom. All right.
So,
Here are our beautiful faces in case you wanted to see us full screen. Here we go. Let's go.
so I'll start first. Agitator, creator.
So we went to this first. I want to shout out the event. So let me just, do you remember the name of it off the top of your head? I'm going to
Mm-mm.
have to look it up. So yesterday, you and I attended, look at my calendar. It was called Rights in Restoration, and it was a virtual forum for, why can't I read the rest of this? For change and people leaders. And it was fantastic. Just want to shout that group out. It was fantastic. So many great speakers, so much great discussion, lots of like, I thought it was good. There were some things like maybe in the back of my head that I thought about later, and I was like, I'm in deep thought on this. But this is your topic, so I'm gonna
No, you know what? I just thought one of the person who opened talked about, you know,
Ernest, right?
yeah,
Ernest
what
Grimm. Yeah.
whether you are a agitator or a creator. And I asked you, what do you think I am? What do you think we are? And you thought we were a combination. Um, um, but you know, when I think about it, I'm an agitator. I'm like a pebble in people's shoe.
Oh.
I like to stir things up. I hate the status quo. I'm probably one of the few people that has that on their resume, and I do. I'm like I I fight against the status quo. And in order to do that, you have to be an agitator. My mom used to say about me, Melonya, you have more guts than good sense, right? And I do, and it's true. And I tend to be fearless in rooms where people want to stifle themselves or to be stifled. And that's not me. I'm an agitator. I'm going to always speak the truth, even if it gets me in trouble.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, and I just want to say
Mm.
that you say you're an agitator, and the reason why when you had like pinged me and asked me, "What do you think like we are?" And like the reason why I said both is like I feel like sometimes we are both agitators and creators almost at the same time simultaneously, like balancing that. I want to agitate, but I also want to suggest some creative options for solution. And I do feel like most people rotate between the two, like, maybe not doing both at the same time, but like, sometimes you have to agitate and sometimes you do have to be that creative bloom. And I've seen you be that creative solution style. Like you're very solution oriented.
Very.
And I just want to say what Melania did not shout out. She is a change management. Like she's certified in that. Like she can help you like do that. And you've helped me like shift my minds around some certain things that I do. So it seems natural that you would be sort of like dancing on the edge of like agitator creator. Um, I feel like last night maybe I was a little bit more agitated because I was like revolution or die. I forgot what I
You
said. I
did
said
say
something
that.
like resistance. like
Yeah, you did.
but then in my secret quiet moments, I'm like, is my address on the internet? Like and I'm like, ooh, the fear kicks in, right? Like that's what keeps us suppressed. Is like, who's gonna come? I shouldn't like you always say to me, don't put things into the universe. But I do think like
No, say it.
ag- I'm not gonna say it, but I do think people don't see the beauty in agitation, right? Like, unless it's in the washing cycle. And then they're like, yeah, agitate my clothes because I know that means clean. But stirring up the pot is a good thing. Because if the pot's not stirred, it burns.
Well, here's the problem that, I have really been, these are interesting times. And, I say you can always swap out interesting for horrendous, right? But
Or effed up.
that's true. I mean, but these are really interesting times. I never thought that I would be alive during a fascist takeover in America. But yet here we are. And I keep looking for the agitators. I think I didn't realize that we were a country of non agitators, right? And this is a time where those who have a spirit to be agitators really need to stand up. because this isn't status quo. It is what we're witnessing. We're
Mhm.
not going to gaslight ourselves,
Yeah,
right? And so but see, to be an agitator, you must be fearless.
because it's risky. It's very risky. And I will say I've lost at least 3,500, 3,600 followers between multiple platforms. I've lost business over sticking with the DEI acronym. And I personally have thought, like, do I remove it? But that's not who I am. Like, that's not my truth. I do believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I believe in it under the umbrella of health, that it is all united together. Like, you can't have good health and well being in this country without equity and diverse voices and including people. Like, I don't know how you get there without that.
It's really interesting that you because one of the conversations last night that hit the table was I call it language bingo, right?
Mhm.
Like, oh, okay, you're offended by DEI, so let's call it inclusion and belonging, or let's call it this, that, and the other. And I think it takes real agitators to say diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're gonna stick with that. We're
Yeah.
gonna stick with that, but also stick with all of the things like, for example, I'm old enough to remember, as we talk about DEI, I'm old enough to remember sidewalks that didn't accommodate wheelchairs. I'm old enough to remember that people who were not able bodied in many ways, they didn't leave the home. They didn't have jobs. They because places weren't accessible, right?
Yeah.
That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. I went to the store, the supermarket, and every time I go, I I curse inside my head because of all of those slots, those parking spots that are assigned to people with who are disabled in some way, or expectant mothers, or people with small children. When I go to Wegmans, there's spots, and I was like, I'd like that first parking spot, but I'm not disabled, so I guess I'm not going to park there because morally it's not right. But all of these things did not exist prior. Buildings were not handicap accessible. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not just my skin color,
Yeah.
it's a whole myriad of things. Extended family leave
It's
for
so much more.
parents.
And it's interesting how people have been so willing to throw out the diversity piece, um, and tie it to race.
Mhm.
Because in this race, I'm going to call it what it is. In this racist country, it is so easy to get a win when you say, well, diversity, like we don't want to be racially minded, because to call those things out and to say, like, that this country is founded in racism and founded in those kind of beliefs, and it's so easy for the diversity piece to disappear because they have more, like, there's more buy-in for that. If you listen to the substitutions of names, diversity is not still staying in that substitution, and that bothers me incredibly. It doesn't just bother me. Bother is a subtle like, that's like nice. A B bothers you. It uh it it builds my rage because that is the clearest sign that an organization is not going to really prioritize diverse voices, because they've gotten away with sort of not doing that. And so if you're not going to prioritize diverse voices, which includes race, ethnicity, gender, ability, then what are you saying? Inclusion, just like inclusion of who is in that inclusion?
Well, you mentioned
What's an equality and an equity? If, like, who are you trying to to bring to the table if you're not including diversity.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned diversity in corporations, and then my mind went to Target. Did you know that recently Target called to the table Reverend Al Sharpton, and I think that there was another Reverend something Bryant. I can't remember his last name, but they called them to the table, or they called. I think it was those two individuals to talk about the situation with black.
Diversity?
No, with
Oh,
black
just with
folks,
black folks.
black folks who have boycotted.
Because they dropped all their suppliers, like, they didn't just get rid of their employee engagement programs and their ERGs and their DEI employee stuff. They actively went a step even further, which is interesting because they were making a lot of money off of, like, diverse suppliers and diverse products in their store.
They found
They
out.
actively pushed them out,
They're,
like,
they're in the
they clearance their stuff,
they're in the FO stage. Because
which
they brought, and I was like, what makes you think that Al Sharpton represents me? I'm just saying, because I've stopped shopping at Target, not because Al Sharpton said. When Al Sharpton started talking about a boycott, I was already a month or two into it. Like, Al, you late to the party. We've already started. The train has left the station, and now you're gonna call him. And I don't. I support Reverend Al. Okay, I remember him all the way to Tawana Brawley or Raleigh, whatever. When he came on the stage and really started being a real activist. I saw him in person. He came to a church when I was a Christian that I had visited. He was a speaker, and I was so surprised. And he's a great orator. But what I was very surprised at is how conservative he really is. And see, when people look at black folks, they think of black folks as always being
some
Democrat,
giant monolith.
a big monolith. But there are people. My father was a very conservative.
Clarence Thomas is black.
Mm, but no, he's not. But no, God, no.
I just we
Mm-mm. I don't even know how you know what? That's
I'm
like,
just saying, like, if you're looking strictly at, like, skin color as,
mm,
like, "Hey, all
no.
black people are gonna think a certain way," that is not true. That is not true.
My father was one of the
He's
most.
and I'm not comparing Clarence Thomas and Al Sharpton,
No,
Reverend
God,
Al.
because
They are not the same
they
at
are
all,
not the same.
but I just wanna point that out.
But his message to us was really, if I was very intrigued, because if a person who was conservative had been sitting in that audience that day, they would have realized that many of his values are conservative values, and that we're not a monolith. My father was a very conservative Democrat, right? I mean, he was black and white on some things. And so when I when they called Al Sharpton and this Reverend, what's the name, Bryant, something Bryant, because he was talking about doing a 40-day fast from Target. But I was like, this movement is bigger than both of them. And you asked many episodes back, what's the end game? Like, like Amazon, Walmart. I'm missing Amazon. Not because I'm such a big Amazon. I miss Alexa. I'm looking over to where she used to be. What's the end game?
She
Right?
probably misses monitoring you too.
She misses telling me the weather every 5 minutes.
She misses tracking you and knowing where you are
She
so that
does.
she can send you, things to buy.
She does. She does.
She's
But she does. Every 5 minutes, Alexa, what what what's the temperature? It's
she's like, "Would you like to buy a thermometer? They're on sale."
but we need agitators now. And many of us, I'm waiting for I'm waiting for the action. Like, when are we supposed to ride?
Well, I think that's happening. Well, and then that's the other thing, right? Like our media is very uh sort of like stuck in algorithms for everyone, right? So we may not, and that was something else that came up in that, like, how do you find things? How do you network? How do you know what's going on? Because some of the stuff is suppressed. Like the AP press just, the AP news just what like reappeared, right? Like they were suppressed for a bit. And so like where are you seeing news? If you're only or if you're only in one algorithm, it's showing you something that is might be markedly different from what's going on. And that's why you talk about ground news so often, like where it grades the news and it gives you some information. But even our social media algorithms that might have the ability to show you networks to have resistance with, those are also sort of routing certain ways. And then you have to think about who owns these networks, right? Because something just came out recently about Twitter, which is owned by Musk, or not owned. He's the CEO of it. How certain voices have been repressed
No, it's
that
owned. He bought it.
disagree. Well, yeah.
He
Well,
owns it.
I'm trying to pretend that there are other people who could weigh in.
Agitator.
At
I'm an agitator. He bought it. He bought it.
He did. So he's controlling it, but I like to think like with these big corporations because they always say when I'm just gonna curse because is
Go ahead.
you're saying whatever. When the shit hits the fan, they always say, "Well, our board members, they thought we should do this thing," right? But when it comes to Twitter and Tesla, oh, not I called it Twitter. It's called X. When it comes to X, right? And
Don't
Tesla,
call it
he
Twitter. That's
really
not.
is the driving force.
I'm gonna call it Twitter. You know what? You know what? I'm not even gonna give him the satisfaction of. I'm gonna call it Twitter.
You don't
Yeah,
wanna call it X, like,
no, because that's stupid. He
after it
calls everything
disappears?
X. I saw one of those driving garbage pails called, called that SUV that he has the other day. Every time I see it when on the road, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so ugly. And I love cars. When I see that thing, I'm like, no, that's a trash can. Just you
You
need
know, when
to.
I first saw it, I was like it looked like one of those, like, moon rovers or a Lego truck. Because my son was very much into Legos, and we built Legos a lot, and I think we built that car quite a few times in the, like, when you're building, stuff and you're just putting it together free, like, I think we actually built that Tesla truck several times as a little kid, and, like, because that's, like, all you have. You only have, like, square
I think
things. So, like, when I saw it come out, like, back before we were all sort of, like, aware that he had an agenda that involved
I'm sorry,
not any of that.
I derailed us. You were talking about,
He d
X and
No.
Twitter.
Well, I was just saying, like, our social media is very much controlled by the owners of social media, which are, Musk, uh,
Bezos, well,
Bezos.
Bezos in terms
He
our
does,
media
yeah,
is
like, I'm sure
controlled.
it's very controlled. So what we see is very controlled, and the voices that are allowed to speak very loudly are very controlled. Like, I recently saw, something about even, like, right-leaning, social influencers were repressed because they disagreed with him on something recently, like, their numbers just tanked. So that says to me that free speech in this country is not free at all, and that social media, the owners of social media are looking at certain things. And we know this happens, right? Because they'll tell you like your feed is being shown to less people because blah blah blah. Or like you're trustworthy, you haven't said anything too aggressive. We're going to let you continue to share your work and share it to other people. You and I, like, we got suppressed by TikTok recently. I don't even know when we'll go back on TikTok. And I'm not quite sure why that happened, but I think it was, I forget even what episode like kicked that off. But yeah, it's interesting how our information is very much like in this algorithm. Because sometimes I get ramped up and I'm like, wait, I'm in a very radical algorithm. So I have to calm myself down. I like to follow a bunch of different people so I see like, what's going on everywhere. I even follow some like very country music leaning feeds just to like see what's out there. I don't disagree with everything that is said by conservative voices. Economically, I do think sometimes I can be fi- now it sounds like I'm going to sound like an old Republican, fiscally conservative. Because
or
I
like a
do think
conservative
everyone should
Democrat,
save more,
uh,
like
or,
save more.
or a
There's
conservative.
nothing wrong with the word conservative, by the way. Conservative doesn't mean Republican. And I want to be clear with that because, like, conservative and liberal have gotten bad names and they are just mindsets, right? It's not a party. Like, I could be a conservative Democrat, I could be a conservative progressive. I'm not a conservative. I could also be a a conservative leaning liberal when it comes to money. Um, but it's just like it's a modifier.
But here's the thing: we can't even talk about conservatism and economics anymore because under the last Trump administration, they spent more than any other in terms of increasing the debt. So that is a fallacy in terms of being fiscally conservative when it comes to spending. But it is, again, just really interesting in terms um, of 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 being an agitator or a creator in this time that we live in. And I think that a lot of folks are waiting for other people to be agitators
Mm.
before they join. Because,
'Cause it's scary.
well, here's the thing too. So if I was just looking because when we were talking about, and I'm going to do some research on this, how many media outlets are owned by conservative people? Um, so the New York Times, which until I did my research, I didn't know that it was a publicly traded company, but a little more than 50% is owned by the Ox Salzberger family. That sounds like old money, doesn't it? Ox Salzberger, you
Yeah,
know
but
that.
most media comes from old money, right? Like printing because realistically, if you think, and I have no data on this, this is just what I remember from school, but that printing presses were a way of making income, and that selling the news, right? Like the newsboy is going, "Get your news, mister." Like this is what I remember. I also love that musical Newsies. So bear with me. But I do remember like learning that the printing press was one of the first ways that people made like money, like selling something that was very, if you think about it, corporate leaning, right? It gave you the news, but a certain view of the news reported by certain reporters and journalists. So we've always kind of had this very like whoever's owning the printing press is printing the story of the day,
Mm.
which I think about all the time. As a, because I think like you asked me, was I like a goth kid like in high school? But I was like a punk rebel kid, and like it was all about like the independent zines like back in the day. And so I think about where like who is owning the printing press sets the tone, and the fact that this is a administration that wants to have control while also saying like we don't want to pay for anything, but we definitely want to have control of the voices you're listening to, but we don't want to pay for anything, right? Like that's another message. Like the state should pay for everything. What we want to control over is the media, your banking, your money. But if you have
Your
any
health,
needs,
your health records,
yes, if you have any
RFK.
your information, but if you have any actionable needs coming out of that, we would like you to refer to your states and they will help you.
Yeah. So when
It's a
you
weird, like,
so
it
let's
seems
pivot. Let's pivot
repetitive.
because you know RFK is going after all of our information, and you
Not just autistic people. Just be aware of that,
well
people.
that is not just he wants access to our information. Our if we are digital slaves. They are buying and selling our information, and it's not good. And there is nothing. And again, I keep looking for the agitators, right?
Mhm.
There is nobody out there saying you just can't access everybody's information, right? We've got HIPAA, right? That is
Well,
that.
I think the ACLU and lawyers right now, these legal firms that are launching not tons of lawsuits against the federal government right now, I think they are agitating in the way that that agitation would work probably well in this. Because if you think about this current administration, they have had lawsuits where they have won and they've gotten lots of money and they've gotten policies through, or they've gotten freedom from I'm not even going to say persecution, prosecution, right? Like, uh, the Supreme Court ruled the president was immune, and somebody brought that forward, right? So I think we still have the law, and the law still is the best way to agitate in this situation, because you also have precedents of the other side being agitators in this way and being very strategic. So if they're in our information, and this is all people's information, violating HIPAA, violating the IRB, because if this is a real research,
What's
right? It would
IRB?
IRB would be the Institutional Review Board, and they cover clinical, not just clinical studies, but yeah, really clinical studies.
Mhm.
Those things have to be reviewed so that they meet, safety and quality, and also protection of information. That people are getting consent to be involved in these studies. I can think of so many prior research projects in medicine that have stolen people's information, that have made tons of money, like the
Henrietta
cells,
Leach.
right? Yes. Where people didn't know they were using their information. So as far as the autism, RFK's like announcement, they're going to go through all of our data. And I think there's some confusion here that it's just going to be the data of people diagnosed with autism. It is all Americans' private records. So I do think this looks like a great, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know anything really, but I would think that there is a potential lawsuit here for violation of the information of the American people. And you would need some people to be sort of like, because you can't just sue on the behalf of whoever. You need some people to actually be potential claimants, or I forget what they call them. That's why I said I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the names of these things, but I do like kind of think of like, and if they need someone, I would do it. I say that, and then someone's going to reach out to me, and I'm like, I have to go outside. Oh no, no. But I do think like this seems like a violation of our rights, and you would need some people willing to kind of say like, don't go into my information. I don't want to. That's between me and my doctor, who I can choose to share that information with too, right? All of us, whenever you're a new patient someplace, they ask you, like, can I go get your records? Who can I share your records with? And I did not see RFK Jr.'s NIH like research project in there on anything I've signed recently.
It's so
Um,
dangerous in the fact that you have access to people's information. You have access to all sorts of information that's nobody's business. Your HIV status, whether or not you've had an abortion, um, uh, whether or not you have pre-existing or whatever illnesses that you've had, some that are very personal, whether or not you've had miscarriages, all of the, whether or not you've had a sexually transmitted disease, all of these things
in your medical records.
you're in your medical records. And who has it, you know, genetics, because when you fill out information about yourself when you go to a new provider, you also talk about your family medical history, right? So not only are you invading my medical information, but you also now have access to the medical information or diseases or deaths or whatever of the people who are in my family, my immediate or extended family. This is such an egregious assault on our privacy. And I keep looking for what they add the voices. And yes, the legal system, the ACLU, which we can actually support. The Brennan Institute is another folks who are waging war, right? But we can put financial support behind
Yes.
this in terms of supporting folks. But the law isn't stopping them. And we're trying to like enact things after the horse is out of the barn.
Well, but still, a part of me says there was a flaw in our laws that were established, right? So by executive order, he's been able to do some things because there's been a couple of articles that much of what he did during his first, and I'm talking about Trump, uh, during his first term was overturned by the next president, right? So the current administration saw the flaw in that and it is moving to make some things permanent that perhaps we should have made permanent or highly enforceable before this with greater consequences. Because everyone talks about HIPAA, but the reality is HIPAA is still a relatively new consequence or a relatively new idea. Um, and so it comes out of because I remember being a a staff educator and educating staff on this new law or this new policy that was HIPAA and what you could and could not do. Now we kind of think, and I forget. So it's got to be less than or around 20 years old. Um, we think of that as like, well, what about HIPAA? What about HIPAA? Well, um, I don't know if that will be overturned. If you can argue that, uh, the American public doesn't have the right to the privacy of their information when it comes to the government. I'm not sure what HIPAA says about if you were under military law, right? Like, is HIPAA still valid? Like, because a lot of things shift when you're under martial law and military law. If it's for the greater good of the country, can you argue that you can invalidate HIPAA? So I think this is a test of HIPAA too. Like, what does HIPAA mean? Because HIPAA um, often is between the provider and the patient, right? And the safety of your data when you talk about the portability of it, which means like sharing of it. And you know, when we were educating on it, we were thinking about the physician and the staff in the elevator, right? Discussing a patient and someone else overhears. And what is the
Or
consequence of
accessing
that?
records.
Accessing records when you shouldn't be in that record,
Mhm,
right? But
mhm.
we weren't thinking that the other person or the other thing in this might be the federal government,
Right,
right? Or the state. What happens when you're in a government that's leaning towards fascism? What happens to your information then? Because many of the laws that we have were written people to people, right? Like,
right,
organization to people. What's your protection from a business? But I will say the government has said, or like, our current president has said, I want to run this place like a business. All right. Well, there's also consequences when you run the government like a business because people sue businesses all the time.
mm,
What does it look like to sue the federal government? Do we need more civil suits against the federal government for violation of our rights? So that's why I think like a lot of this will play out in policy and law. The other way it could play out is violently, right? Like, they do say power is not given freely, it must be taken. So, what does it look like to take that power, not through legislation, but through action? Um, and I hope. my big hope is that the military, because we have one of the most powerful militaries in the world, that they remember their oath about the Constitution and protecting the Constitution, and understand what the Constitution entails, including, which was talked about a decent bit on that conversation we went to, the right to assembly, right? As people march and they assemble, the right to be safe, to assemble and speak your voice. And so I'm hoping that if there is martial law declared or the military's brought in, that they remember that in the US, we do have the right to assemble and to have our voice heard as part of our rights as, people living here. And due process, damn it, due process.
I've said to myself a number of times that because of the 2 Trump presidencies, I have remembered more about my history and civics studies because he really challenges all of that, and we are woefully behind in terms of the protections of our protections of our information, right? And now we got RFK, who made a lot of people. There were a lot of people offended. I work part-time for an organization that supports people with autism and neurodiverse um, uh, um, uh, uh, realities, right? He made a lot of people angry from that population in terms of
His obnoxious statements about the
yeah.
value of people with autism,
I
that
think about
autistic people will never pay taxes, they will never have jobs, they need their butts wiped. And I do want to just also say, I believe he is expressing some of his family trauma involving an aunt, right, who had a lobotomy. I think he has a view of what disability looks like based on his small experiences in a microcosm of the Kennedy family, when if you did not meet the standards of like their performance standards, you were put away. That you tried to fix whatever that difference was. um and the whole idea of the 50s 60s, when they had these institutions where you placed people who weren't perfect members of your family, that's not what we want to return to, because some of those people who were placed in those facilities and who were lobotomized and who were given like not the same ECG treatment, the electrical stim treatment that we have today, um, but different and like more aggressive and more damaging. Those people might have been agitators, right? Women who spoke too much truth, right? People who had differing opinions often went into the mental health area as patients because they were routed that way to be taken care of as like agitators, dissidents. So I think we're forgetting that piece of our history too, as we start to erase history, which seems to be the theme of this administration, to get rid of any difference in history. That's the stories we're losing. And RFK is he is the descendant of that particular style of treatment when it comes to if you were different in the family. And we're talking about like very very elite people, like rich people. They didn't want to have to deal with that, so they shooed it away. Like they hid it. So I don't want to return to that. And that's why, I think to myself, he was the worst possible person to lead the health department, because he has such a fractured reality with what mental health would, and mental health is a huge part of healthcare, right? Like you can't have physical health without mental health. And the fact that he has this opinion of what autism is from and I'm not saying that autism can't be debilitating. I'm not saying that at all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying to cure that, it is, I'm not even gonna say it leans towards eugenics. It surely is eugenics. We do not want to have eugenics discussions in this country. We do not want to start looking at people and saying, "You know what would be awesome if we could not have any mental," like, yes, mental illness is a problem in this country, but to eliminate the disease, like, it's not even a disease, to eliminate that piece that gets turned on, if it's a genetic piece, what would the world look like? I don't know if I want a world where everybody is absolutely the same, where everybody's brain maps the same way. How do you have innovation? How do you have difference of thought? How do you have, we're all thinking the same way?
Let me just say this, right? What he is focused on is not about health. Because if it were about, see, we don't care about health care in this country, period. Right? I just saw through one of the executive orders, or one of the annihilation of our government. They cut funding to police officers for mental health
Mhm.
and counseling, right?
That
So,
sounds smart.
right. So we and or was it service? Well, we've also done that for veterans as well. So to claim that you have an interest in the health of the American people is a lie, because we don't. We're trying to cut SNAP and Medicare and Medicaid, right? The funding for those things, which are absolutely health related. So we really have no interest in the health and well-being of people in this country. And we absolutely have no interest in mental health, because geez, it's only been probably within the last, what, 10 years or less, that people feel comfortable enough to say that I'm in counseling, or I'm seeking therapy, right? And then if you go into certain communities, Black communities, it's changing some. In some, communities, people that it's a hush.
Mhm.
We don't talk about mental health issues. And we, some folks have a, oh, ain't nothing wrong with you, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Depressed, what you got to be depressed about, right? So framing this in terms of what you were talking about before, science is slow.
Mhm.
He's trying to, under the guise of trying to be helpful towards autism, which I don't trust. He's trying to gather all of this information, and by
From everyone,
from
not
everyone.
like, and I wanna call that out because this is not just a gathering of information of people with autism. This is going into your records,
Yes.
even if you don't volunteer it, to find out, well, is this person autistic? Because he wants to cure it by September, right? That's his date. So he wants to cure by September something that has been researched, has been looked at, like, but this man with no medical degree,
None.
no
None.
background in health, he has vowed a cure, like, by September. And so what is that cure gonna look like too? I wonder, for those who, like, I can understand refining the gene, like, where, like, what the genetics of that looks like, but how are you gonna cure it for people who are already here? What are you gonna do to us? We're already here. Or are you looking to tag us so you can know, like, what's the purpose? I don't understand the purpose of this. Um,
Well, because it's not health related. It's invasive. It's not health related. And like and again, So we're in the April, and we're at April 25th. We're going into the end of April, May, June, July, August, September. So in 5 months, you're going to have a cure for autism? No, you're not. You are a vaccine denier. One of the simplest things that we could do. He was talking about cod liver oil or something for measles, right? And so now you want to access our information for what? For what purpose?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very upsetting. Um, I know we're coming close to the end. I did want to just share some facts that I looked up about the impact of science funding cutting. So, so they're looking at cutting. There's a proposed $9 billion reduction in science funding. And so, if you think about science funding as not a short-term return, but a long-term return, right? Because science takes time. And the reason why science takes time is nobody wants to like I wouldn't want to take an intervention or a medication that was only tested on 3 people, right? Like when you talk about health and wellness and interventions, you want to know that they work on multiple populations, that it's been tested and vetted on both genders, right? Like both sexes, which often in the past that didn't happen when we
It
were
still
less
doesn't
rigorous. It
as much.
still often doesn't with our scientific testing. So when you talk about cutting those funds, so there's a project called SciMap, and so they map the science projects, and they have shown that even partial cuts to the NIH funding would result in an estimated 16 billion in economic losses and 68,000 jobs eliminated nationwide. So for $9 billion, right, you're going to cut $9 billion, but the actual economic costs for that would be perhaps $16 billion. And they're not academic positions alone. They are also positions that might be in the life sciences industry, which is, those who are taking some of that research and distributing it outward. So we're looking at, so in the Bay Area alone, which is California, which California, I learned recently, could probably be its own little country because it has the economic power to do so. So in the Bay Area alone, there's 156,000 workers that all of this is built on federally funded programs, and they represent, they give approximately, they contribute 143 billion, right, dollars in economic output. So for $9 billion, you're looking at like just from the economic losses of that 16 billion, you're possibly looking at putting 143 billion just in the Bay Area at risk. And so, because these research projects that they're slashing, these research projects often lead to innovations in healthcare and medications. So what about when you remove the birth care funding, right? So when you start looking at birth related healthcare, which this truly impacts Black women giving birth, right? So mortality and morbidity funding programs for research into morbidity when it comes to, which is deaths in pregnancy. When you look at that, that's being cut. So when you think about what is the cost of caring for someone when they're critical versus preventative care, it's always cheaper, right? It's always cheaper. Rural facilities, like rural areas, this is impacting rural areas because you're talking about the closing of clinics, you're talking about the closing of access. Low income families that depends on these research projects and depend on clinics and funding for reproductive care. And I'm not talking about tracking your period, right? Like how to find your most fertile time. I'm talking about real safety and clinical and access issues. So there's this false sort of thought that I'm going to save some money today. Right? I'm going to show you, oh my gosh, I saved you, American people, $9 billion through my magical cuts. When in the long run, what I've done is I've eliminated programs that were actually saving much more than that, and helping much more people. So the question is, do we have the right people looking at? Because I'm not going to say that there isn't excess in government, there always is. Um, but do you have the right people on that team? And do you have the right agenda in mind? Like what is the purpose of these cuts? Are they because they seem to be targeted towards uh low income families. They seem to be targeted towards LGBTQ plus projects. Um, all of the groups that have been targeted by this alt right, which I'm going to say white supremacist, right? Like, I'm just going to call it what it is, administration. Like, this in the long run does not help the United States as a whole. Because the truth is, white supremacists benefit from much of the programs and much of the research that is done and for and comes out of, BIPOC communities, queer communities, and low income communities. It's not like they don't benefit from the research, right? It's not like when I put on my red hat, which is the same in my mind as putting on a hood. It's not like I then opt out of all programs that I could belong to. It's not like I show that red hat and I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to get access to Medicaid anymore if I qualified for it. I'm not going to use a clinic. I'm not going to. I am definitely avoiding all curb cuts.
Well, here's the thing that is really disturbing about where we are today. It's it's anti-intellectualism on every level. So, the going after the universities and colleges and cutting funding. A lot of that funding cuts into research, right? Um, and some of these colleges and universities help do the research that makes many of the breakthroughs that we have, right? So we decimate our Department of Education. We are not we. This regime is decimating the Department of Education. It's going after educational institutions. We keep lowering the bar. You know what? We're at a fifth
The
grade.
CDC lowered their developmental markers, right? Like that happened in the beginning of the year. We didn't really talk too much about that because there's been so much else, so much else.
Right. So we keep, as a country, we keep lowering the bar in terms of knowledge and research and being informed, and we are getting dumber by the minute, by the second. And then my agitator brain is like, why isn't there having a millions of people amass on a Saturday helps you to see that there are other people like you, but it's not disruptive. If we are going to stop what is happening today, we must all be agitators and disruptive.
And you and I have talked about national boycotts, right? Just like days of like no buying of anything. Like
National boycotts, national strikes. You're going to have to shut, somebody was saying, someone that I follow is like, if teachers decided to go on strike just for a day, that would shut everything down. Because who's going to take care of your children?
And so, you know what? That's interesting because I know that and here's what's fascinating, certain groups are not allowed to even walk away from their jobs. Police, nurses, I think teachers can't go on strike without some type of announcement. But it's a fascinating like concept that we already have some laws in place that prevent us from actively sort of being agitators, from
Yeah.
saying like we're going to walk out of the job every single place, right? Because there's some controls to that. So it's almost like there's some foresight to one day people may want to have a powerful voice, and here's who we're not going to allow to be involved in that, because that truly shuts down the country. But there's nothing that really says we have to obey that. And I put that out as a nurse. And the reason why I throw that out there is we have an administration that is actively not obeying legislation.
Agitators. We need to be, we need to have, and here's the thing, if you have PTO, if you have a day, do I take a vacation or do
Well,
I,
you know what? That is for nurses and police and fire, it's a little different.
it
You
is
have to
different.
request for it. But I will say, what's to stop us from 4 hours or even an hour or 2 hours of we don't go. No go. No go,
Yeah,
sorry.
and there's some things, right? If
An
I,
hour would break the country with
but
police and firefighters and nurses and
but
healthcare.
here's the thing. So everybody cannot resist in the same way.
Well, yeah.
I don't want nurses and doctors not to show up because they are
This is very hypothetical.
no,
Okay?
no,
Very they're
I
truly
do.
needed and it's dangerous if they don't show up.
I want our police to show up. I want firefighters to show up. I want nurses and doctors and healthcare practitioners to show up. So their resistance might look different than everybody else's. But for others of us, there is going to come a time when we have to say, we're going to shut down the economy whenever we want to. And we don't have to do it. We don't have to have a prolonged shutdown of the economy, but we might say, this Friday, yeah, we're going to use a PTO day. We're shutting down the economy, right?
I say we just don't pay our taxes anymore,
You
just
can't,
federal
but it
taxes.
gets
I
us.
know you do that.
That's let's be real.
I know.
They get it before we do. They get our money.
They
Isn't
get
that
all
some
that.
shit? Now, when you stop think
Yeah.
about it, that somebody's got their hand in your pocket, like before you, who have actually done the work to earn this money. Before you get any of it, we're gonna take our share. And how about this? And we're not gonna give you anything for it.
Yeah, taxes is well, that brings us back to like why they dumped the tea, right? No taxation without representation. So, we're a little bit over time. That's my bad. I was in control of controls and supposed to be telling us things like that. But I want to leave us with that. No taxation without representation. And do we feel we're being represented in this current administration? Is it time to throw tea into the bay? Maybe it is. Or maybe here's another thought, and I always say this: succession, right? Like the states can succeed. And with the announcement that California is an equal country, fiscally makes
Economically.
economically as Japan, I think, right? Like they have trillions of dollars. New York also has trillions of dollars. What does it look like when the big players leave? Or threaten to leave or threaten to pay taxes in a different way from those states. Because let me just say, those states have incredibly high taxes. And what does it look like if federally you're like, I'm only going to give you like not that? Like, I'm going to give you what
Agitator.
maybe say, yeah, like what does it look like for California to pay the same amount of taxes as Arkansas pays
Mm.
to the federal government? Because there is a difference in what the different states pay federally. So what does that look like? Because there's a lot of banking on the moneymakers in the country to support the ideas that maybe they don't agree with. And I'm not going to say that all of California is blue leaning, because they're not.
Mm.
Um, They have money, and capitalism loves a good fascist show, let's be honest. Because it's all about control. It's about money. So, but that said, this was fun. It's always fun.
No, it's
It's always fun and thoughtful. And anything else anything you're working on this week?
What am I working on this week? I think I shared with you. I am working on a presentation for women who are cancer survivors. And actually, I'm going to be delivering that in June. So I am still kind of formulating that, and feel very honored to be able to hold space with folks, and it's making me look at things such as radical acceptance, right,
Mm.
and how that plays into um our goals, and accepting where we are in this moment and making goals for the future. So it's really something that I'm really enjoying putting together. I'm also working in terms of my day job, working to create some organizational and culture change. And I've shared with you by holding focus groups and working with the executive leadership team to make some really needed changes to make the organization more sustainable. So these are some of the things that I'm doing that I'm really loving, actually.
Oh, that's awesome. And for the one for women cancer survivors, that one, is that for anyone can attend that, or is that for a certain organization? Or are you gonna like
It's
share when it
it's
comes
it
closer how
y
to attend?
yeah, it's gonna be an in-person event, but it's through Roswell Park, which is one of our, it's a cancer institute here. And so they organize these community conversations. So
Oh,
yeah, and so uh, it's through them that this is being sponsored, and I'm going to share that with you because I'm like, you work like I don't want to get in front of people and be like, hey, this is what I think, and they're like, this girl does not know what she's talking about. So
that
yeah.
would never happen. You're a brilliant researcher.
Oh, God bless you.
Um,
Yeah.
mm, mm.
What are you working on?
So I am working on like, still doing I do want to just say like I'm working with a publisher who has just an incredible vision towards make ensuring that the content that they put out really is not just inclusive but thoughtful. And so I've been working with this particular publisher, and I wish more medical publishers, more medical organizations, healthcare organizations thought about the different types of people reading their content and really made it accessible for everyone. So I'm still working on that project. I love that project. And the other thing I've been sort of working on is like a virtual course on like health equity that I've been working on in the background for my site. And then one more thing I'm working on, which I'm trying to formulate with my brother. My brother is in the music industry. I've talked about him with you a few times. And so I would love, like, we're trying to come up with a way to do a very healing in person workshop at his studio that leaves people with a sense of resilience and also with a song, right? So we're trying to figure out how to merge the concept of songwriting and health equity, growth, resilience work into an empowering workshop. So that's what he and I are trying to pull together. So I'm
That's
hoping we can like weave it together. Though his wife said to me, I don't know if people will like resonate on this. So I'm curious if people listen to this, like, is that something that like is I'll do a poll probably about that. But I do feel like that would be like a fun and resonating thing to do because I love music and I think music heals. I'd
it.
love to leave something like that with a song, right? Like you leave with a song, like a creative spark of a song, while also having some. resilient stuff. So
Sound is sound. I'm very, very impacted by sound. Very noise, sound. Um, uh, 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 God, it wasn't last year. The year before, my cousin who had cancer. I went to visit him a few months before he passed, and he is a healer, right? And he uses sound bowls, right?
mm,
And he did that for me, and I was in tears. Um, Sound is very healing. So,
yeah.
so that kudos to you.
Yeah, it can be very healing, very
Sounds like a fun
empowering.
event.
Yeah, we just have to weave it together, and we also have to find the right place to sort of like, I hate to use the word market because like, but you have
Well,
to
no,
find,
yeah,
yeah.
market because
So
people need to know about it.
yeah, so
Cool.
to share that in because it's a beautiful space, and I think it has the possibility to be a beautiful event.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working on.
Cool.
Oh, this was such a good morning. Oh, yay.
Yay.
Okay, my bad. I kept us over. I am going to close us out, and thank you for being here, those who joined us and listened, and we will see you next Friday.
We had a good time and hope you did too. Join us each Friday as we fill the brain drain one unscripted conversation at a time. Like, subscribe, and share. Help us spread our reach on YouTube. Until next Friday, stay curious.